You held their entire life together and they didn't even know it. While you were there, everything worked. They had someone to regulate their emotions when anxiety hit. They had someone who understood their pain without judgment. They had someone who stuck around despite the withdrawal, the hot and cold behavior, the emotional unavailability. They had someone who absorbed all the damage their patterns created. You were their shock absorber, their safety net, their emotional life support system. And they took it all for granted because you made it look effortless. Now you're gone, and their life is crumbling in ways they never saw coming. The structure you provided is gone. The stability you maintained has vanished. The functions you performed, functions they didn't even realize they depended on, are suddenly, devastatingly absent. They're experiencing the full weight of their patterns without you there to cushion the blow. And it's destroying them. They're falling apart across every area of life. Their mental health is deteriorating. Their other relationships are collapsing. Their work is suffering. Even their physical health is breaking down. Because it turns out their entire existence was built on a foundation they didn't maintain. You maintained it for them. This isn't evidence they loved you deeply. This is evidence they needed you desperately. There's a difference. Love would have motivated them to change while you were there. Need only becomes obvious once you're gone. Their falling apart proves they were dependent on your labor, your emotional work, your sacrifice. It doesn't prove they valued you. It proves they used you. And now the bill is coming due. They lost their emotional regulation system and they're drowning in feelings they can't manage. You were their thermostat. When they felt overwhelmed, you calmed them down. When anxiety spiked, your presence grounded them. When emotions they'd suppressed for years broke through their defenses, you helped them make sense of what they were feeling. You could name their emotions when they couldn't. You could validate their experience when they felt lost. You could hold space for their chaos when it spilled out. This wasn't partnership. This was you functioning as their unpaid therapist. You did emotional labor they should have learned to do themselves. You provided external regulation because they never developed internal regulation. And your willingness to help prevented them from building the skills they desperately needed. Now you're gone and they're drowning. Anxiety that you used to manage is consuming them. They have panic attacks they can't calm. They feel overwhelmed constantly. The emotions they suppressed are flooding their system and they have no idea how to process feelings without you there to guide them through it. They're experiencing emotional chaos that their defenses can't contain, and they have zero tools to handle it alone. The drowning shows up everywhere. They can't focus at work because anxiety is eating them alive. They can't sleep because they're overwhelmed. They're using alcohol or other substances to numb what they can't process. They're compulsively seeking distractions, scrolling endlessly, binge-watching shows, anything to avoid sitting with internal experience they can't regulate. Some are making impulsive decisions trying to escape the emotional overwhelm. Others are completely shutting down into depression because shutting down is the only regulation strategy they have left. People around them are noticing. They look stressed, exhausted, unstable. Friends are asking what's wrong. Family is worried. But they can't explain that they're falling apart because they lost the person who was secretly holding their emotional life together. They can't admit they're drowning because the life raft left, because that would mean admitting they were dependent, that they needed you, that they can't actually function independently like their avoidant identity claimed. This is what happens when you stop being someone's emotional crutch. They fall, hard. And the fall reveals they couldn't walk on their own. They needed you holding them up, every single day. No one else will tolerate their patterns while providing what you provided, and they're realizing it. They thought replacing you would be easy. Just find another understanding person, another patient person, someone else who gets it, someone who won't make demands, someone who will tolerate the withdrawal and the inconsistency and the emotional unavailability. How hard could it be? Turns out, impossible. Because what you provided is rare, exceptionally rare. Your combination of deep psychological understanding, endless patience, and willingness to sacrifice yourself is not normal. It's not baseline. It's not something they'll find again. And every failed attempt to replace you is teaching them this brutal truth. New people won't tolerate the same shit. New people establish boundaries in weeks that you took years to establish. New people leave when the withdrawal starts instead of pursuing to restore connection. New people require consistency instead of accepting whatever scraps of attention they feel like providing. New people expect emotional reciprocity instead of functioning as their emotional support while getting nothing back. New people protect themselves instead of absorbing damage. Each new person makes them realize what they lost. This person doesn't understand them like you did. That person doesn't have patience for their patterns. Another person can't read their emotions the way you could. Someone else won't accommodate their need for space without implementing consequences. Every comparison shows them you were irreplaceable. The failed replacements are piling up. They're going on dates with people who seem promising until their patterns emerge and the person disappears. They're trying relationships that fall apart within months because normal people won't sacrifice themselves the way you did. They're being rejected over and over by people with healthy boundaries who recognize their patterns as red flags and refuse to proceed. And with each failure, the reality sinks in deeper. You weren't just any partner. You were the partner who could tolerate their dysfunction. You were the 1 in a million person willing to destroy yourself, trying to love someone who wouldn't do the work. You were the exception. And they destroyed it. Through their patterns. Through their refusal to change. Through taking you for granted until you had no choice but to save yourself. The realization is crushing them. They had someone who understood their wounds, who saw through their defenses to the hurt underneath, who stayed despite every reason to leave. And they'll probably never find that again. Because people like you, people who sacrifice that much, are rare. And most of them wise up eventually, just like you did. Their support system sees the patterns clearly now and refuses to enable the comfortable position you maintained. While you were there, you buffered them from consequences everywhere. You managed some of their other relationships. You covered for their flakiness. You explained their behavior to confused friends. You smoothed things over with family. You maintained their social functioning through your effort while they coasted on your labor. Now you're gone and everyone sees them clearly. The buffer is removed. The patterns are hitting their friends and family directly, and people are responding very differently than you did. Friends are establishing boundaries. If you cancel on me one more time, we're done. Family is confronting them. Your behavior is unacceptable. You need therapy. People who used to tolerate their patterns because of you are no longer tolerating anything. Because you were the reason they got slack. You advocated for them. You explained their wounds. You asked people to be patient. Without you doing that work, they're facing raw consequences. And their support system is pissed about the breakup. Everyone saw how patient you were, how understanding, how much you tolerated. When they learned the relationship ended because of the avoidance patterns, because of withdrawal, betrayal, refusal to change, the judgment is universal and harsh. You had someone amazing and you destroyed it. They gave you chance after chance and you blew it. What is wrong with you? This social rejection is compounding their spiral. They're losing friends. Family is maintaining distance. People who used to be in their corner are now openly critical, because betraying someone as patient as you revealed character problems that people don't want in their lives. Because if you couldn't prevent their dysfunction with all your understanding and accommodation, then clearly the problem is them, not their circumstances. They're becoming isolated. And isolation makes the emotional regulation loss worse. They needed support during this crisis, and their support system is withdrawing. Because the support system correctly identifies that offering support just enables continued avoidance of taking responsibility. Some friends are straight up telling them, get therapy or get out of my life. Family members are refusing to listen to complaints about being lonely. You did this to yourself. People are holding them accountable in ways you never did, because these people don't love them the way you did. They don't have the same investment. They won't sacrifice themselves. They'll just leave. The abandoned feeling is ironic. They're avoidant. They fear abandonment. They organize their whole personality around preventing abandonment through controlling distance. and now they're experiencing mass abandonment as consequence of patterns designed to prevent it. Everyone is leaving. Because their patterns made them someone people don't want around. The deterioration is real consequence, not evidence of love or transformation. They are falling apart. This isn't performance. This isn't manipulation. The mental health decline is real. The isolation is real. The inability to function is real. The suffering is genuine. They're truly experiencing devastating consequences of losing you. But let's be absolutely clear about what this means. Their deterioration is consequence. It's what happens when someone dependent on another person loses that person. It's withdrawal symptoms from losing their supply. It's the system crash that occurs when the person holding everything together stops holding it together. This is not evidence they loved you deeply. Love is demonstrated through choices, through prioritizing someone's needs, through doing hard work to become better, through sacrificing comfort for the relationship. They had countless opportunities to demonstrate love while you were there. They chose patterns over you every single time. They chose defended comfort over doing the work. They chose their avoidance over your needs. What you're seeing now is need, not love. They needed your emotional regulation. They needed your understanding. They needed your accommodation. They needed the functions you provided. And losing those functions is destroying them. That's dependency. That's what happens when your life support system unplugs. It's not romance. It's not devotion. It's the brutal reality of losing someone you were using. The deterioration is also not evidence of transformation. Suffering alone doesn't create change. Crisis doesn't automatically generate growth. Pain doesn't equal progress. Most avoidants in crisis do not respond by getting therapy. They don't examine patterns. They don't do vulnerable internal work. They just suffer while refusing to address what's causing the suffering. They're experiencing consequences without learning from them. They're falling apart without taking responsibility. They're deteriorating without changing the patterns that created the deterioration. Because transformation requires action. It requires therapy. It requires sustained uncomfortable work over years. And most avoidants would rather suffer indefinitely than do that work. Watch what they do, not what they're experiencing. Are they in therapy? No? Then nothing's changing. Are they doing genuine internal work with a professional? No? Then the patterns persist. Are they taking accountability and changing behavior? No? Then deterioration is just suffering, not growth. Their falling apart might last months, years even. They might suffer extensively. And through all that suffering, they might never do the work that would actually address the root cause. Because defended resistance to vulnerability exceeds the pain of consequences for most avoidants. They'd rather hurt than heal. They'd rather fall apart than do therapy. They'd rather blame circumstances than examine themselves. You are not responsible for saving them from consequences they created. Here's what you need to understand with absolute clarity. Their deterioration is not your problem to solve. You are not responsible for their emotional regulation. You are not obligated to return because they're struggling. You don't owe them your presence because they can't function without you. Their inability to manage without you is their problem that they must solve through building their own internal capacities. Not your problem to solve by sacrificing yourself again. They created this situation. They chose patterns over relationship. They refused therapy while you were there. They took you for granted. They failed to reciprocate. They hurt you repeatedly. They made the choices that led to you leaving. These consequences are the natural result of their choices, not your cruelty, not your lack of compassion, their choices. If they're in crisis, they need a therapist, not you. You're not a mental health professional. You're not equipped to fix their attachment wounds. You're not responsible for managing their emotional chaos. That's what therapy is for. That's what professionals train for years to handle. Your job was never to be their therapist. You got pulled into that role because they refused to get actual help. Returning to help them just restarts the cycle. You become their regulation system again. They stabilize. They resume patterns. Nothing fundamentally changes because you being there prevents them from facing the full weight of consequences that might actually motivate therapeutic work. Your presence is the problem, not the solution. Because your presence makes their dysfunction sustainable. Real help looks like maintaining boundaries. It looks like letting them sit with consequences. It looks like allowing them to experience the full cost of their patterns without rescue. It looks like forcing them to develop internal capacities or to get professional help instead of using you as crutch. Boundaries aren't cruelty. Boundaries are the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself. Their falling apart might generate guilt in you. You might feel responsible. You might wonder if you're being too harsh. You might think about reaching out to check on them. Don't. That guilt is misplaced. You didn't cause their deterioration. Their patterns did. Their refusal to change did. Their dependence on you instead of building their own capacities did. You simply stopped enabling it. Some people need to hit rock bottom before they'll get help. Your presence prevents rock bottom. It cushions the fall. It makes the dysfunction tolerable. Removing yourself might be the only thing that creates enough pain to motivate change. Or it might not. They might just suffer without changing. Either way, that's their choice to make, not your responsibility to prevent. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your healing, to your future, to building a life with someone who doesn't require you to destroy yourself to maintain their basic functioning, to finding a partner who's already done their work instead of someone who expects you to be their work, to protecting yourself from people who take more than they give. They're falling apart. They should get therapy. They're struggling emotionally. They should learn regulation skills. They're lonely. They should examine why their patterns drive people away. They're suffering. They should do the internal work that addresses the root cause instead of seeking another person to use as emotional support system. Their crisis is not your emergency. Their falling apart is not your problem. Their deterioration is not your responsibility. You didn't cause it. You can't fix it. And trying to fix it by going back just delays the inevitable while sacrificing yourself again for someone who won't do the work to change. Let them fall apart. Let them experience every consequence. Let them sit with the full weight of what their patterns cost them, because that's the only chance they have of actually doing something different. And even if they don't, even if they suffer forever without changing, that's still not your problem to solve by destroying yourself, trying to save someone who refuses to save themselves. Your job now is simple. Stay gone. Protect yourself. Build your own life. Let them figure out theirs. Without you as their crutch, they'll either learn to walk on their own or they'll stay on the ground. Either way, it's not your job to carry them anymore. They lost someone who loved them enough to try everything to make it work. That loss should hurt. It should devastate them. It should force reflection. Whether it does or doesn't, whether they grow or don't, whether they change or don't, none of that is your concern anymore. You did enough, you gave enough, you sacrificed enough, now you're done, and their falling apart is simply the cost of losing someone they never appreciated until it was too late. Let them fall. Their crisis will likely motivate manipulation, not genuine change. Watch what happens next. As the deterioration continues and the pain becomes unbearable, they'll start reaching out. Not because they've changed, not because they've done the work, but because the crisis hurts and they want relief. And you represented relief. You were the painkiller for their emotional chaos. Now they're in pain and they remember what made pain go away. You. So they'll try to get you back. The breadcrumb text will start. Hey, hope you're doing well. Been thinking about you lately. Saw something that reminded me of you. These aren't genuine expressions of care. These are tests. They're checking if you're still accessible, if the door is still open, if they can restore access to what you provided without having to do the hard work of actually changing. If breadcrumbs don't work, they'll escalate. They'll reach out directly. I've been struggling since you left. I realize now what I lost. I miss you so much. They'll tell you they've been thinking about their patterns. They'll say they understand now. They'll claim they're working on themselves. And none of it will be accompanied by evidence of actual therapeutic work. Listen carefully. Crisis-driven promises are not genuine change. Desperation-fueled insight is not transformation. Pain-motivated contact is not love. It's need. They're not reaching out because they finally value you. They're reaching out because they need relief from consequences. You are the emergency exit from pain they can't tolerate. The manipulation, conscious or unconscious, will be sophisticated. They know what you want to hear. They spent the entire relationship learning what made you stay despite their patterns. They know you value self-awareness, so they'll demonstrate awareness. They know you wanted them to acknowledge problems, so they'll acknowledge. They know you needed to hear they'd change, so they'll promise change. They're giving you the performance you always wanted, but performances aren't transformations. Here's the test. Are they in therapy? Have they been going consistently for months? Can they name their therapist? Can they describe what they're working on? Do they have evidence, actual behavioral changes maintained over time, that demonstrates capacity has developed? No? Then everything else is just words designed to restore access to you. Real change is quiet. It happens in therapy rooms over years. It shows up in consistent behavior across time. It doesn't announce itself through dramatic contact when they're in crisis. Real change would mean they get help whether you return or not. Real change means they fix themselves for themselves, not to get you back. Real change doesn't need your validation or your witness. It just happens because they finally chose growth over defended comfort. But most won't choose that path. Most will choose the easier path. Find you or find someone new to fill your role. Reset the system. Get back the regulation, the understanding, the accommodation. Resume the comfortable position. Avoid the actual work. And if you respond to their crisis contact, you make that path possible. They may communicate their deterioration to mutual friends, creating pressure on you to help. This is a common tactic, often unconscious. They start telling mutual friends how much they're struggling, how hard things have been since the breakup, how they can't eat, can't sleep, can't function. They share just enough to paint a picture of someone in genuine crisis. And those friends, being caring people, start getting concerned. Then those friends come to you. Hey, I talked to Avoidant, and they're really not doing well. I'm worried about them. I know things ended badly, but maybe you could check in? They really seem like they're falling apart without you. The friends mean well. They see someone suffering and they know you care about that person, so they're trying to help by facilitating reconnection. But this creates inappropriate pressure on you. It positions you as responsible for their well-being. It suggests that their deterioration is somehow your problem to solve. It frames you as cruel for maintaining boundaries while they suffer. And if you're someone who struggles with guilt or who has caretaker tendencies, this pressure can be incredibly effective at breaking your resolve. Here's what you need to understand. Mutual friends don't see the full picture. They didn't live the relationship. They didn't absorb the daily harm. They didn't sacrifice themselves trying to love someone who wouldn't do basic therapeutic work. They see current suffering without understanding the years of patterns that created necessity for your departure. They're responding to crisis without context about what led to crisis. You need to set boundaries with these friends. I understand they're struggling, but that's not my responsibility. They need professional help, not me. I can't sacrifice my well-being to manage theirs. Please don't put me in the middle of this. If friends can't respect these boundaries, you may need distance from them too. Some friends will push back, but you care about them. How can you just abandon them when they're suffering? This question reveals fundamental misunderstanding. Maintaining boundaries isn't abandonment. You're not responsible for another adult's emotional regulation. Caring about someone doesn't mean destroying yourself to save them from consequences of their own choices. The friends applying pressure need to redirect their concern appropriately. Have you suggested therapy? Have you offered to help them find a therapist? Why are you asking their ex to fix this instead of encouraging them to get professional help? These questions expose that the friend is taking the easy path, trying to get you to solve the problem, instead of supporting the avoidant in getting actual help. And be very clear with yourself. If they're communicating their crisis to mutual friends, they could use that same energy to find a therapist. If they can text friends about their suffering, they can Google therapists. If they can meet friends for coffee to discuss how hard things are, they can show up to therapy appointments. The crisis communication is strategic, whether conscious or not. It's designed to generate rescue. It's designed to create pressure that breaks your boundaries. Don't let it work. Your life is better without managing their dysfunction, and you know it. By now, enough time has passed that you've experienced life without them, without managing their emotions. without walking on eggshells, without pursuing someone who withdraws, without the constant anxiety about relationship status, without sacrificing your needs, without the exhaustion of loving someone who couldn't love you back adequately. And your life is better, significantly better. You have energy you didn't have before, mental space they used to occupy, emotional bandwidth for yourself. You're doing things you put on hold. You're reconnecting with parts of yourself that got lost in the relationship. You're remembering who you were before you became someone's emotional support system. You might have moments of missing them. That's normal. You can miss someone and simultaneously know that being without them is healthier. You can feel nostalgic about good moments while remembering the relationship as a whole was unsustainable. You can care about them from a distance while maintaining absolute clarity that reconnecting would destroy the peace you've built. Their falling apart doesn't change your truth. You're better without them. Your life works better. You feel better. You function better. You're building something healthy that their presence would contaminate with dysfunction you're no longer willing to tolerate. So when you hear they're struggling, when you feel guilty, when you wonder if you should check in, remember this feeling. Remember how good it feels to not manage someone else's emotions. Remember how peaceful life is without their patterns. Remember that you tried everything and they chose dysfunction over doing work. Remember that their crisis is not your emergency. And then keep moving forward. Keep building your life. Keep protecting your peace. Keep choosing yourself. They're falling apart after not getting your love. That's the cost of taking someone like you for granted. That's what happens when you refuse to do the work. That's the consequence they earned through every choice they made that prioritized patterns over partnership. Let them fall. You're not falling with them anymore. You're rising. And that's exactly where you should be.